Hey, this morning I had a little bit of downtime before we started the car. It's a good thing I made a list. And the main thing I put on there was double check everything. Last night I ran into an issue where I went to start the car and first crank, the relay basically died out on me. I went to Audi Barry this morning, got a new relay. So I've got that in the car. I'm just kind of waiting till later in the morning to get it started up. And once time passes, then we'll give her first crank. But I figured before that, I'd go over, I guess, some of the stuff that's in the car, some of the essential components that you'll need to get started. So this is a rather hard component to film to show you just due to the fact that the rad support is on. But just in behind your oil cooler is your oil pressure sensor for the 12 valves. What you're going to want to do is tee into that with a plumbing fitting or an automotive fitting. You're going to cap one end of the tee, thread in your oil pressure sensor to the top, and then thread in your oil feed line to the side. That's just what I did for the oil feed. For the return, I just connected a bung underneath the oil pan just off the side, and that's just what I did for the return. Everything connects to the turbo. I'm going to be replacing this pan and getting another fitting to redo the return. This was just something I had mocked up when I originally started the build, and I'm just going back over everything and changing out parts that don't really work. For the coolant feed, I just teed into the thermostat housing at the front of the water pump right there, and connected it just below the oil feed on the stock line, on the inlet line. And then on this side here for the return for the coolant, I actually ended up cutting and 90ing the return line just to make it easier to fit the KO3 in, and then I just ran the return line up and over the engine and teed into the reservoir here. That's how simple it is to get started on the 2.8 turbo build. Now I'm going to go over why it's important to get an air-fuel controller. Whether it be the Apexi or you go full standalone and do a forged internal build. But I have gone through 1, 2, 3, and the 4th new MAF is in the car. Now, if you don't get the air fuel controller, what you'll end up doing is you'll end up stressing out the mass airflow sensor, and you'll read a high voltage circuit. Now, what that'll do is it'll mess with your fueling going to the car. It'll mess with obviously your airflow intake, and it'll just throw the parameters in the ECM, and basically your car will not run. Now, the easiest way to diagnose that it is your MAF when you're doing your turbo build is unplug the MAF, and it should throw your O2 sensors. If your O2 sensors throw, then you know that your MAF is your main issue. As far as moving forward from the MAF and into the air fuel controller, it took me, I'd say, a good year of research before I found the air fuel controller that I was going to use to adapt for this car, as well as talking with other group members and just kind of seeing what was out there for the platform. Unfortunately, there's not too much, so I did have to go with a Japanese air fuel controller. That is the Apexi AFC Neo. And if you check out my other videos, I did an in-depth diagram as to how I set up the wiring. Basically a full breakdown video of the wiring harness being cut up, being resoldered, put back together, and just being put back in the car. You will have to, if you're going with short-bodied injectors, you will have to modify your fuel rail. That is something that I just ran into as I was doing the build. I figured, oh, everything will just kind of fit. False. Everything does not just kind of fit because it comes from another Audi. So we're currently sitting at a no crank, no start. I've got power to the starter, alternator, obviously coming from the battery. I've got power to the relays. I've got power to the fuse box. I've got power coming down the wiring harness. I can hear the initial engage of the starter, but just for whatever reason, she won't turn over. So I'm gonna go back through all the electrical and take it one step at a time. I've already replaced the relay. I've gone through and replaced the fuses. The Apexi does start to light up and does glow and say Apexi AFC before it shuts off, and I'm assuming that's just due to the fact that the car won't crank, won't turn over, so it can't register to turn on. But the illumination comes up. That all has power. The wiring harness has power. I can't figure out this no crank, no start right now. Yeah. The alternator is sitting a little low at 8 to 9 volts, which I know is considerably low and should be sitting around 13 to 14. I might just have to replace the alternator if I can't figure it out from here. I just want to take the time to say thank you to all my subscribers and everybody who's new to the channel. Welcome.